It's Friday afternoon. You're just about ready to kind of kick off the weekend in style. Why don't you kick back, relax, and here's some of the picks I have for this weekend when it comes to your favorite Louisiana teams, all right here on the Louisiana Lunch Hour Podcast. And welcome, everyone. It's a Friday, second full week of the pod in the books. And more importantly, we've got college football, NFL football. Right before recording, watching some of the Cowboys and Eagles game. It has got me in the right mood, the right mindset to start this party off. And again, it's noon, on a Friday. I'm sure maybe if you got a nice cushy job, you're probably already out the door. You're getting ready to just enjoy the weekend. It looks to be a pretty nice one weather-wise, so hopefully you're ready to enjoy all kinds of football, whether you're going to watch LSU over at Tiger Stadium, whether you're going to go watch the Cajuns take on McNeese on Saturday night, or if you're making the trip over to New Orleans on Sunday afternoon to see the Saints take on the Cardinals, or better yet, if you're just going to be a couch potato and watch as much football as humanly possible, whatever you're doing, we respect you for it, and hopefully you are having a great time. And more importantly, we hope you are subscribing to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on whatever podcast platform you have. I think we're on a lot of those. And also, make sure you go ahead and check us out on YouTube. Over there, we got some exclusive content that is dropping on the daily. Again, just search Louisiana Lunch Hour wherever you get your podcast from. And I want to kind of start things off with not necessarily the biggest game of the weekend, because I think that goes to the Saints by default, because this week, to me, feels like it should be reversed for most weeks. Because I feel like when we see these week one matchups that are marquee, and then you just drop down, everybody just says, hey, you got these big games on tap. LSU, Clemson, Texas, Ohio State. Now you go down to playing the jabronis, the jobbers, if you will. It's the body bag game week, and that's all fine and dandy, but at the same time, it's just, I feel like it's a week, for the most part, you can kind of figure it out right away who's going to win what game. But we'll start off with LSU, Louisiana Tech, and I feel like there's no doubt in my mind that we see the LSU Tigers win that game. But I think I'm more intrigued with this one more than any other game on the docket is the spread of this contest. At the time of this recording, the Tigers are 37.5 point favorites on FanDuel against the Bulldogs. Now, back in the day, I used to make some crazy, stupid parlays, and I always said if there's a massive spread of about 4 or more touchdown difference, 9 times out of 10, that dog is going to cover, especially in college football, because more often than not, it's going to be a game where LSU is going to call out the dogs in the second half, and they're going to wind up having it be at least somewhat competitive. You look at last year with LSU taking on Nichols in week 2 after that disappointing loss to Clemson. You'd think they'd go belt to ass in that game, but they only wound up winning 44-21. So 37.5 point favorites against La Tech. I got to think they at least get a backdoor cover, but LSU does win after that impressive win over Clemson. They'll probably remain in the top 5, maybe drop down a little bit. Just depends on what else happens in week numero dos. Meanwhile, getting to the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, the game that has me the most nervous out of all of them. And I've been talking about this a lot all week, because you have 2 very different teams than I think we expected heading into this matchup. You have the Cajuns. They're having to turn to a relatively inexperienced quarterback to lead this team. This will be his first collegiate start. This kid, Daniel Beal. And he looked good in that final drive, but not necessarily enough to obviously get the job done and walk away with a win. But he managed the game well enough, considering the situation that he was put in. And this was a team that looked unsatisfactory on both sides of the ball against Rice. And then you have McNeese with the prodigal coach Matt Viator returning to the program after all these years, and he's looking to make a statement that the Cowboys have something good going after the last few years have left a lot to be desired. This is an old school rivalry, bringing it back to the territory for the first time in a long time. I think the last time these two teams played, I think Chandler Rome was covering the program for a little bit for the Lake Charles American Press, and that feels like it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Now, all that said, I think Daniel Beal has a shot to prove himself and say that he can carry this team through some rough times. This Cajuns team has been kind of cursed with a lot of quarterback injuries since Dez took over. And I don't think it has anything to do with how he handles business. It's just the weirdest stuff I've ever seen. Like, you go with one starting quarterback the whole time Napier's here, and not just one for all the years he was here, but it was just one quarterback, and that guy stayed the starter the whole season. Since Dez took over and the culture carried over, you've gone through at least two starting quarterbacks over the course of a season. One of those you had three. And I feel like it's not his fault. Just things happen. And maybe this team's a little bit snake bit. Maybe there's some bad gree that needs to be going on. And maybe you need to kind of get some Marie Laveau type to kind of lift the curse off of this team, because it's a weird vibe right now if you're a quarterback for the Cajuns. And this is one of the reports that came out a little bit before I started taping, is that LouisianaSports.net says that Walker Howard will undergo surgery on his oblique, so that'll likely end his 2025 season. So Daniel Beal has a lot to prove, because I don't think they want to just say, hey, Daniel Beal, go out there, and if he doesn't look great, you just throw in Lunch Winfield and you call it a day and you stick with that guy. I don't see that happening, especially because if you do that, I feel like he's going to be a lot like Brandon Harris in 2015. Why do I bring up that name? Mainly because of the game you have next week. I think you're going to see Daniel Beal at least start through the Mizzou game, because you've got that game on the road. Either way, both these guys are going to be shell-shocked. But I think if your first ever start in the world of college football is against a Missouri program that is on the rise, and also just an SEC team in general, I feel like you put anybody in that position, it is going to be the definition of pain. I would not want to be in any of those kids' shoes. Just put that bluntly. But the Cajuns, I feel like they're going to get a lot better this week, because they don't have to deal with a team that's going to be running the triple option down their throat. Because I think that's been the biggest issue for the Cajuns, is the fact that they have had trouble stopping the triple option over the last few years. I think we'll learn a little bit more about the secondary with the Cowboys starting a former Red Raider in Jake Strong. And the head, we always go with the brain here on these picks. I think the Cajuns do get to 500. But beyond that, it's anybody's guess now. Hopefully the quarterbacks can stay healthy long term, because heaven forbid you see Daniel Beal or Lunch Winfield go down and you're pretty much down to one guy at QB. And then you're like, okay, can somebody, then like you're probably going to have to start playing like high school ball, worst case scenario, where you just put out the best athlete at quarterback and you hope for the best. That's not what you want to see if you're the Cajuns. Now we get to another game that's going to be a body bag, and that is the Grambling Ohio State game. In fact, the head coach pretty much said as much during his press conference. It's a paycheck game. You know, he knows what this game is. Now, a lot like the LSU game in La Tech, I think Ryan Day and his alleged nipple ring are going to call off the Dogs middle of the second quarter, and Grambling will likely lose 42-7. I don't have a score prediction outright, but I feel like it's going to be one of those games where it's not a complete, hobnail boot up the backside, but you will be seeing a very one-sided contest here. So I say Ohio State is going to be Grambling, and it's not even going to be close. I mean, you're playing the number one ranked team in the country, right? And again, this is very much, squash match Jones type of schedule this week. Northwestern State, they're taking on Minnesota. It was a good moment last week for the Demons getting their first win in about 3 years, since 2022. But this is a back to reality type game. The Golden Gophers are going to beat Northwestern by at least 3 touchdowns, and they're going to kind of handle their business, and we'll move on from that game. Now, we get to UL Monroe in Alabama, and I've been seeing a lot of the conversation shift over the last week about, is this going to be a repeat of 2007? And I've said it since week 1, since last week's show. UL Monroe will not repeat 2007. I've been saying that, and I'm sticking by it. History will not repeat itself, because here's the big difference I think people are forgetting. Yes, Alabama lost to unranked Florida State, but I think Florida State's a lot better than people give them credit for. Alabama, when Nick Saban took over in 2007, was a poverty program for many years, and he wasn't able to get his honest to goodness true recruits in the house. Nick Saban's gone, yes, but the name brand of Alabama in some cases is more than enough to get people in the damn building and get people committed to the program. I think Kalen DeBoer, he's going to get better as the next few years progress, and he starts to kind of start cooking with his own ingredients and really learning how the NIL world works, especially across the SEC. I think they win this game, and I definitely feel like it's going to be at least a 3-touchdown win, if not more. But if they somehow do lose that game, I think DeBoer will be on a DeBoing out of Alabama on Sunday. Full stop. And if UL Monroe wins, I think Bryant Vincent is going to have statues made of him, because when it's all said and done, because if he pulls that off, I feel like a conversation is going to be had about him leading this team to even greater heights, almost in spite of everything going on with that program and university. And I'm talking the athletics program over at UL Monroe, not just, what Bryant Vincent, his typical job is. He's the interim athletic director as well. So there's a statement that's going to have to be made if you're Vincent and the Warhawks. Meanwhile, looking at the FCS, a few games on deck. Nichols taking on West Georgia. Nichols kept it competitive against Troy last weekend. So I think Tommy Rybecki, this era is going to continue on a positive trajectory. I firmly believe we see them get a dub over West Georgia this weekend. Meanwhile, Tulane's taking on South Alabama in Mobile. And this is going to be a much more competitive matchup tomorrow against the Jags than they did last week against Northwestern. But I have to feel the odds are absolutely in favor for the Tulane Green Wave, especially if we see that same energy from the defense. I think Jake Ratzliff, he's going to get better as the season progresses. This is going to be another test for him to kind of make sure he can get this offense firing on all cylinders and not necessarily having to rely as much on the defense getting TOs, getting turnovers on the board. Because it's great to have that, but you have to prove that you can do this and also eat up a good bit of time on the clock when it comes to some of these bigger games that they're going to be dealing with over the next few weeks, because they've got some tough games on the horizon that could kind of trip them up. Because right now they seem poised, if they can kind of get all their ducks in a row, to be a top 25 team, because they are very close. They got a lot of ARVs last week after that really nice win over Northwestern. Hopefully they can keep that momentum going. Southeastern versus Murray State. Based off what we saw in the opener against Louisiana Tech, this offense has potential, but just couldn't quite put it in the end zone. Murray State has been on the struggle bus for a minute, so I feel like they'll find a way to get points, and the Lions will get the dub to get to 500, which it would be a great thing to see for that program. It'll wrap up the college slate with the Southern Jags taking on Alabama State. The Jags look great with Cameron under center last weekend after he filled in for Jalen Woods. Get well soon, man. Knowing that he had that head and neck injury that stunk, and thankfully he is okay. Obviously going through concussion protocol and probably going to be out for a couple more weeks. But the fact that he's able to kind of move all his extremities and feel good, I think that's a win in and of itself. Now we get to the main course here, and that is the New Orleans Saints taking on the Arizona Cardinals. We'll wrap it up here. And I said a lot yesterday. I want to believe in the Saints this year. I always do. I will always believe in the Saints' potential. That said, there's so much unknown. Can Kellen Moore be a good head coach with this franchise that he has kind of inherited? Because it feels like this Saints team in 2025 on paper screams 2000 Saints team, a team that barely squeaked by into the playoffs with a relatively brand new head coach in Jim Haslett. You got Aaron Brooks leading things, and they looked good. Not necessarily great, but they got their first playoff win in franchise history in that year. I feel like there's that potential because you've got guys like Alvin Kamara. Kendre Miller's gotten better. You've got a pretty decent wide receiving core. Now, the $1 million question is whether or not, one, your main guys in, Devon Vele, who you traded for in the preseason, and Chris Olave, especially him with the injuries and the history of concussions he's been dealing with. I think you have to kind of think about that when it comes to how this team does. I feel like if I were to give a Saints season prediction this year, I think, 10-7, 9-8 is probably the absolute ceiling, and that is best case scenario. Worst case scenario, people were saying 0-17. I'm like, I feel like 0-17 is like out of the question with this team. I think 3-14 is something that I feel like could happen. That's your ceiling. So if I were to give you a prediction right now, I think we see a 6-9 type season. And that's not what you want to see. 7-10 record. I think that's going to be where the New Orleans Saints are going to be this year. A 7-10 record, kind of somewhere more towards the ceiling, but still not a great look if you're the New Orleans Saints. And I'm sure the Saints fans don't want to hear that, but that's just the reality of things, is that this franchise has not tanked. Yes, they tanked somewhat last year, but I think that was just because you had everything go wrong in weeks. Continue to say, if you didn't have the injury to McCoy back in week 3 against the Eagles, you probably have a chance to at least host a wild card game. At the absolute least, you're hosting a wild card game. Whether you're making any further pushes beyond that is anybody's guess. But I firmly believe that was going to be the situation for the New Orleans Saints, if not for that injury, and then also led to everything else, including Derek Carr's injury, and everything fell off the rails very, very quickly. Now, going back to the game on Sunday, I don't think they'll get this win on Sunday. You have Chase Young. He's going to be out more likely than not, and probably out for the next couple weeks. Seems like he'll be better long term, but that's going to hurt the pressure they could bring to Kyler Murray to make him make some mistakes. You combine that with an offensive line depth that has not shown a lot of promise with all the injuries they've had in the preseason. Trevor Penning, more likely than not, going to be out for this game as well. It just gives me a vote of no confidence because of that, and also the unknown about this team. I just don't necessarily trust what's going on right now. And I hope we see, Spencer Rattler play well. And I hope we can see this team get better as the season progresses. But I think this one to start the year, especially if they don't start strong, they are screwed. It is going to be a one-way traffic if they allow that game to get out of hand very early. That's kind of where I'm seeing it. And I think Arizona wins this ball game 27-21. Saints will keep it competitive, but it will be a relatively fast start for Arizona if the Saints can't get it done quick. But that'll about do it for today's podcast. Catch you on the flip side on the Monday. We'll recap it all for you, and we'll do so in 30 minutes or less. Well, the next pizza's free. Just kidding. I ain't got no pizza. Hope you had a great weekend. And also, make sure you follow us on social media, and also check us out on YouTube. We got some exclusive content over there. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.